Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Lighting Guy podcast, a podcast from AV Nation TV. It's about lighting, lighting design, and the integration thereof. Tonight's guest is Edmond Deraedt, and if I try to read his entire bio now, we'll run out of time. So I'm going to give you some of the highlights. Edmond is a man of many trades over the course of his career, but some of the things that he's done as a lighting designer include working for Dr. John, Jimmy Cliff, Israel Vibrations, Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, Joan Osborne, Ladysmith Black Bombazzo, Jefferson Starship, Maxi Priest, and India Ari for some of the newer kids out there. He's got a bio. Well, first of all, he has an awesome website. It's like going on a little intergalactic journey, but But the bio page is worth a read in and of itself. I'm really thrilled to have you here tonight. Edmond, welcome to the show.
James, thank you very much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. When George, our producer, introduced you to me by way of sort of showing me your site and talking to me about you, as I read a little bit, your journey in the business, it seems emblematic to me of a lot of people's journeys. You know, you sort of start in maybe a technical place, or you start in an artistic place, and if you stick with the business and you sort of work on the craft, you sort of find yourself weaving through a lot of different points and disciplines. And so,
Sure.
talk to me a little bit about how your career started and how you sort of wound your way through to where you are now.
I don't really think of it as a career per se. My interest in anything visual started when I was a very young teenager, and I was making home movies on 8mm. I think as a lot of people have started, and that brought me through kind of an interest in photography, and eventually to a study in filmmaking and photography for a little while. And then I kind of dropped it for a long time, for years actually, to explore handcrafted, handcrafts and that kind of thing. And then I was drinking one night with some friends, and they decided to form a band. And out of the blue, I said, "Well, I'll do your lights for sure." And that kind of brought me my idea of lights back then, because I didn't really have any idea what any of that meant, was a bunch of projectors where I could project my photography and slides that I would kind of create and hand paint and explore with various other mediums of transparent inks and stuff. So that led me to the stage, and all of a sudden I was lighting a concert, and that's how that started. So it was definitely a drunken night.
Yeah, as all good journeys begin, it starts with a drunken night, right?
Right.
It's funny. I had a similar start in terms of designing shows. My first job was hanging lights in the local community theater. So I knew roughly like how to hang a Source 4, and when I changed majors in college, a kid grabbed me in the hallway and said, "Hey, I hear you know how to do lights." I had no formal training in design at all. Didn't even know where to buy gel, and so I needed a lot of green for the show that I was doing. So I went to a local art store and got like transparency that sort of vaguely worked. And then 2 days into the run of the show, it all melted. It was But yeah, I know what you mean as far as just you jump in and you start.
That's excellent, because I actually went to the stationery store and I got those report folders, because I had no idea. And they melted, I think, the first song. But it was kind of a cool effect, it was like a reveal.
Yeah. So it was a drunken night, and you started playing with stage lighting, and then what happened after that?
Well, then actually, it was wonderful. It was immediately wonderful, and the people that I was working with were fantastic. They were great musicians and great people. So I just kind of stuck with it, doing it, and I then started to talk to people who were involved in theater locally, and I realized, wow, there's a whole stagecraft thing going on. So I started investing in gear, actually, and slowly but surely, after a couple of years, I became kind of the biggest ticket in town for lighting, which was where I was living was not a huge market if I was the only one, but it was a very strong economy based on the kind of economy that might want a lot of reggae music coming through.
Sure.
So I lit a lot of reggae, a lot of funk, and a lot of classic rock and stuff. So that's kind of where I got my start, but I still really owe it to filmmaking and photography.
Sure. Did you have formal training in either stage lighting or in film and photography lighting?
Yeah, I went to the San Francisco Art Institute for a little while, not very long, and then I dropped out, unfortunately. And but I did start, I went through a formal apprenticeship and other things. But yeah, I studied for a few years under James P. McHugh, and he's kind of a part of the old guard. He was like, I don't know, USA 29 number 50 or something like that, and direct assistant under Jeannie Rosenthal. So it was kind of a direct lineage. We spent an entire year just on color, which was cool. Yeah. So from there, I really got the bug, and I started doing theater and moving away from rock and roll and doing things that were a little more experimental. And I still liked making my own gadgets, and that's something I think that I carry over from being a hand craftsman. Is wow, like building little things that did things. I'd build like little effects that would like the corners, and I would still kind of rig things weird, and a lot of I started getting into soft goods and projecting patterns onto those. And so and then another thing that theater gave me is you do rock and roll, yeah, I guess, or
when I was in performing arts, I did a lot of. I did not so much rock and roll as much as I did dance work and a lot of like jazz and like that kind of work. Not so much rock and roll, but not big concerty stuff, but more small bore music stuff.
I think but your collaborator is the music.
Yeah.
And you're kind of adjusting to that, and still, even though I've been touring with the same act for 7 years, I still treat every single show as a busking experience because that is how I love to work.
Sure.
And it's like film too. I've been shooting on digital lately, but this summer I did something on 16 millimeter, and there's just this excitement when the film's going through the gate because you have to. Everything has to be there. You're burning film. You can't just let this HD roll and roll and roll. And I feel like the music, that's how I get it's just more exciting.
Yeah, I get that. And, one of the things that I think it's interesting, the dichotomy between rock and roll or performance lighting like that and, say, a theater piece is once a theater piece is locked, it's pretty much locked. You may change things a little bit once you get into the run of a show, but generally speaking, you're trying to get to the show to a place where it's frozen, right? That's what they say.
Yeah.
And
but
so,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But your collaborators are other people, and that's interesting to me, and that's where I was going originally, I guess, is that I went from the thought of collaborating with the vibe that was coming right off the stage to collaborating with a group of people to produce a product.
Right.
And that was exciting. That was something I had never experienced, actually.
Would you consider yourself, because I find that lighting designers in theater background, in theatrical productions fall into two categories, a set designer's lighting designer or a director's lighting designer?
I never thought about that. I tend to answer to the director exclusively when I work in the theater. But I like the set, And actually, it took me a little while to realize I have to like the set.
Listen, I was the same way. I mean, I feel like lying inside every lighting designer is a frustrated director, in the sense that for me, it was always about trying to help tell story and help put the focus on stage where I thought it should be, and help the director sort of move the story forward if it was a story piece. I mean, sometimes you're doing experimental pieces that are more about other thematic exploration, but whatever the intention of the piece was, my sense of it was help the director get where he or she wants to go. It wasn't until fairly later on, a little later on in my career, where an established lighting designer said to me, if you want to get work, you really should start lighting sets better. And I was, oh, okay, yeah. It's a question I like to ask. I like to ask people. So when did you move into broadcast lighting? When did that become part of your packet of tricks?
Well, I had been lighting corporate events on and off for cash. Sure. And working for a couple of specific companies around. And so lighting cameras was something that was on my radar. And it just kind of fell on my lap, to tell you the truth. And I was kind of touring and living bi-coastal and spending time here, working here and there. And then I decided to move back permanently to New York about 4 years ago. And someone called me out of the blue, someone I haven't heard of in years and said, hey, we need somebody over here at the network. Come on down. And
Sure.
I've been there full time for 4 years now, which is crazy. But,
Yeah.
it's been a good experience, actually. It's interesting having a job where you show up at a desk and you do lighting, you clock out, and you go home.
Yeah. What
But,
can you give us a sense for what you're working on day in and day out at the network?
and you kind of froze up there.
Sorry, no. What are you working on day in and day out? What's your what are you punching the clock on?
You mean specifically?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to share it, yeah.
Oh, well, it's Major League Baseball Network.
Okay.
And so during the season, we're on the air 12 hours
Right.
live, which is crazy. And so there's actually 3 principal LDs and then a few guys that kind of rotate through that. And we switch off and we're just, we're lighting live shows. Now, during the season, it's interesting. There's not a whole lot of variation. So once we have something locked in, it's locked in and it's flowing. Once in a while, we'll have to light a special and we'll have to scramble really quick for a morning and light something.
Right.
But it's the off season, interestingly enough, where it gets really kind of busy, and we're kind of having to light on the fly things that so all of a sudden we're grabbing all the gear and all the stands that we can and trying to light something and shape something in this environment in an hour,
Right.
and then getting it on the air live. It's pretty crazy, but then that kind of goes back to the whole busking thing as well. It's kind of cool. So.
It's and I think your career is kind of a good example of how, as a lighting person or a lighting designer, you collaborate with you find yourself in all kinds. When you have an intimate relationship with a musical act, and they trust you, you become a sort of silent performer, and you're not getting approval on every look change you do in the middle of a solo or any of these. They trust you to do that show to show. All the way up to working in a corporate environment where I imagine there's quite a bit of approval for a lot of things that you're doing.
If you step out of bounds of what they expect, you definitely hear about it for sure.
Yeah.
But it's been pretty successful for me so far.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do a whole lot of broadcast work when I was doing a lot of performing stuff. I worked as a lighting supervisor, I guess you could say, for inside the actor's studio for a couple of years.
Oh, nice.
And that was the kind of gig where it's similar to what you're saying. Once we locked it, I was working in service of the lighting director, so there were some shows that I ran myself that I did my own tapings, but the look of the show was very much set by the producers and corporate, and my job was to reenact it week after week when we did the tapings. And it's so interesting to me how no matter, it sounds like, well, you've got a set lighting plot, so just turn it on and get going. It looks different every week when you do it, like you get on camera and it's like, well, that doesn't look right. There's a lot of subtle maintenance that goes into something like that. And
yeah, definitely. And the makeup artist maybe, switches off and they used a different base, or maybe some lamps are getting old and you're getting a little bluer. And yeah, it's a constant. Your CTV is burning out.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of variations. But you must have heard some amazing speeches.
Oh yeah, I mean, we had tapings. That show tapes in open format, right? Like he just lets them go. And we had a couple of guests, like Robert De Niro spoke. Not Robert De Niro. Dustin Hoffman. He spoke for like 6 hours. He just kept on talking. Like the guy, he was doing a great service for the students. Like they would ask questions and he would just, talk and talk and talk. We actually had to we ran out of tape, because it was just like, it's time to send everybody home, man. But yeah, it was fun. You brought up lamps, and I guess what I would ask is, over the course of your span working, have you fallen in love with certain gear that you keep coming back to, or are you open to working on with as LED evolves? Are you using more of it, or every designer's got their own bugaboos about what gear they'll use and what they want. Do you have favorites, or do you try to stay open?
Well, I have to stay open with what I do, because I'm not really to the level where I can spec a lot of gear unless I'm working with a theater company
Right.
and we're doing something, and then I can spec. But even then, I really disliked LEDs when they first came out. I got to admit, and if I used them at all, I would use them in blues, and or magentas, and that's about it. And
Right.
but lately, the whole advent of the LED Lecos has really inspired me. And I like those quite a bit. But I just got my hands on a stack of Pani projectors, which I'm incredibly excited about. Um,
Hey.
those are great. Those are great. If you have the patience to sit there and make slides, they're fantastic. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because gear keeps evolving, and I work with the Broadway Green Alliance. I'm a big proponent of LED where it makes sense. But what I tell designers is, you know, I'm not going to. I would never tell anybody how to light their show. I mean, I'm all for energy efficiency, and I push for that in the work I do. But if it doesn't serve the project, then it's the first thing you have to do is serve the project. And then if you can serve the project as efficiently as possible, then that's great, But you have to start from a place of designing the show properly.
mhm.
Um, and the gear keeps evolving. I think the Holy Grail is really a reliable, rich white that you feel good about. Um,
Well, I think the best LED white I've seen has to be Studio Forces.
yeah,
They're gorgeous,
yeah, I
and
definitely
I
agree.
saw some panel lights. I don't know if you went to Photo Plus a couple weeks ago, but there are some new panel lights that are really starting to just be really fantastic. Great performance, very punchy, a good color index. They're nice.
No,
Yeah.
it's an evolution, and I think that what I love about our industry in comparison to some others is that you know, there's not this big gap between a designer and the people that touch the gear. Designers often are the guys touching the gear, the women touching the gear, and therefore the feedback back to the manufacturer is very direct. There's not this sense of, I work my primary work now is on the architectural side, and there's a
Uh,
lot of layers between a manufacturer and the boots on the ground that really use the gear. Um,
Huge. Yeah.
and there's so many people in that food chain. Whereas in the entertainment world, there's the guy that hangs the light, the guy that focuses the light, and the designer. And that's it. And very often a designer can go to a booth at LDI or write an email to a manufacturer and say, actually your whites didn't do what they were supposed to do, or your color shift was not acceptable. And that feedback, with the way that the technology is today, that feedback loop is so fast that you're seeing a great evolution in how this gear is getting to market and improving.
That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's good.
it's a
Yeah.
huge. I mean, compared to some other disciplines, it's fantastic.
Yeah, we had a couple lights that were designed by a company that we were trying out. I think we were their main voyage, and over at MLB, and they really stopped performing.
Yeah,
But they actually came out with they kind of kept working, kept us in the loop as far as what they were doing, and they were taking our feedback directly about it, which was fantastic. So,
sure. So talk to me a little bit about your approach on any. Let's leave broadcast out of it for now. Let's take either a music piece or a theatrical piece. You get a call from a director friend or a writer friend or producer friend and says, "Hey, I want you to light this piece." They send you a script. How do you go through that process? What gets you started on something?
it really depends. I used to, of course, I think like everybody else, would read the script for a couple weeks until I just knew it. But I really I enjoy talking with the person that approached me and finding out really what they're thinking about. And I've come to look at designs. I try to boil everything down to one word, and not necessarily even a metaphor, but really what we're trying to say. Because I think if you can boil it down to one word, like if you can say this is about disillusionment or this is about clarity, then you always have that one word to go back to, and then things can kind of unfold naturally from that. Well, okay, we have the scene, and we're talking about clarity, and of course, to show clarity, you need to show distortion,
Right.
right? But so when we get into that, what can we really do to give clarity, or what can we do to give oppression, or So I think as long as you have that one word, you can always find your way out of the woods.
Sure.
And I find myself in the woods quite a bit, so that's kind of my approach. And as far as personal things, I like to lay down blankets of really strong, really saturated color, and I don't. I always go there, actually, almost always. And even if I blast it away with just color correction of some sort, there will always be that in the shadows somewhere. There will always be that blanket or that underlying tone that kind of saturates the shadows, and that's. So I'm looking also for, well, are we kind of in a big space that makes us feel lonely? Well, what do the shadows look like in that kind of space? So I'm always kind of thinking about kind of the subtext, as it were, in that sense, and trying to bring that out into a visual representation.
Yeah, I think the distilling down to one word, that that's a great tip for if any younger designers are out there listening to this, or will be listening to this. It's something to hold on to. That it's very easy in the course of a production to get caught up in whatever the drama of that particular production is, and I'm talking about the backstage drama, right? I don't have enough tech time. They didn't book me a big enough crew. I really wish I had 10 more Mac 500s, whatever whatever the drama of the production is. It's really easy to get lost in that stuff, and I think lose what the project is, and lose what you're trying to do. And distilling it down to something really focused like that, whether it's a word or a key phrase or however you want to do it, it's a huge thing. And one of the things that I worry about is that our design processes get so truncated now with the sort of speed with which we're supposed to be turning these things out, that I worry that artists aren't given enough time to really think through, or not advocate for, but collaborate on what every moment of a given piece should look and feel like. And so a lot of that stuff is getting figured out in tech, and that's not really the way it should go. That's my feeling about it. I don't know how you feel about it.
I've become actually a huge proponent of workshopping pieces, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And I think artist residencies are a fantastic thing. My wife, actually, she's a designer as well, and she had the incredible opportunity to be taken away for overseas for 6 weeks to develop this piece, and then come back and go a tour retreat in Maine for another month to work on this. And they brought it to BAM, and it was like, well, first of all, the choreographers were brilliant, and her work, it just resonated. It was more of a spiritual experience than a theatrical piece. I mean, it was so, they were so clear about what they were saying, And then I think, the speed thing is hard. And also what you were saying about, I wish I had this, it's the personal attachments get tough. And I think, though, that I went through that, and especially with rock and roll. Oh my God, I wish I had this and that and the other thing. But if you're really trying to present something to the world, you really need to step back and say, okay, let's do something that's really worthy of presentation. Yeah.
I come back to this idea all the time, this idea of what I call the George Lucas effect, this idea that, he did the original 3 Star Wars films with limited budgets and limited timelines, and there are these iconic pieces, right? Well, however you feel about Star Wars, but, they're iconic pieces of filmmaking. And then he comes back 20 years later, and he's got an unlimited budget and no one to tell him no, and no time constraints, and they're just filled with extra stuff because there's nothing hemming it in. There's nothing that draws you to it as a through line. And I think we as designers, our job is not to add, generally speaking. I feel like our job is to edit more than anything else. Our job is to get rid of options and refine more than it is to throw extra things in a production. That's what I try to embrace if I can.
Yeah, agreed.
Do you think, well, how do I, how do you feel about creating environments or doing environmental work or any of these sort of, have you done a lot of that? Do you feel like, you said you did some corporate work, and do you feel like that's a part of the work, a part of what you do, or is it something that you're sort of not as interested in anymore?
Uh, Putting out uplights and lighting banners is something that I do for it's cash, you
Yep.
know.
Yes, it is.
Um, I think that I mean, it's better than flipping burgers. I think I probably just lost a couple clients on that one. Uh,
Listen, man, I get it.
yeah, but but regardless, I do the best I can.
Yeah.
I'll always make sure it looks good. I'll always make sure the focuses are tight and nothing's like tripping out or a weird color or something. As far as full environments, uh, I still do experiment with large format with projection,
Mm.
and did a couple installations last summer, and starting to mix music and dance in with that. And there's a core group of four of us that are working on that, and that's been pretty inspirational, to tell you the truth. And I like that, actually. A lot of writing, and lately it's going to be the next block in the bio there. And I wouldn't mind doing something more site-specific, full environment. Uh, yeah, that actually has to do with a lot of analog projection and handmade light sources and stuff like that.
And one of the chunks in your bio is that you're a teacher. Do
I am.
you? That's what I thought I read. Maybe I read that wrong. Yeah, maybe I just did coursework. You did coursework, maybe? I'm not sure. I went through all this. What is this? Well, now I'm embarrassed. Let me
Oh,
see.
don't be.
I thought I saw that in the upper corner. Anyway,
Should I get my black robe and my baton?
yes. No, but forget about being a teacher. If you had to sit down a young designer or a room of young designers, what are some of the things that you might say to them? They're getting started in the business. What would you put out to them?
Eesh. Work as much as possible and produce as much work as you can, and don't be selective at first, and work with as many people as you can, but keep the gems that you find. Like, if you really resonate with a costume designer or really resonate with a choreographer, a composer, stay with them. And it's funny. I was there was an electrician that moved into town recently. I was kind of helping her find gigs, and she said to me, "Well, I don't know how to keep asking this person for work without sounding like I'm badgering it." Well, it made me think, don't you want to take an interest in the
Yeah.
people that you're networking with? Like, hey, what are you up to? What are you producing? I see you're producing this. That's really cool. I did this once, and so just be honest and nice and polite, and with the people that you're networking with. And it's not all about the workload. It's really about an interplay of people.
Yeah.
And if you just strive to work for this one person, I mean, maybe in a mentorship, it's great to do that because you want to learn under this person. I mean, I did that, but you want to work with people that you can feel good about creating something with. At the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with that. Your first point about saying yes is a big one. In the beginning, I don't think it's pays to be super selective. If for no other reason than for the first couple of years, you got to know what you like doing, what you don't like doing, and
Exactly.
you're not going to know that if you're being picky about what you're going to work on. And let's be honest. I mean, it's a competitive business. There's a lot of people that want to work on projects. So.
Yeah. True.
And
It's the only way you're going to find out what you like, though. True.
yeah, and I was fortunate enough that I found a couple of little sandboxes that I got to play in, and it comes from saying yes. Like I lit a festival show. I don't know how familiar you are with the Brick Theater in Williamsburg.
Oh, really? You were there?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it was part of a show last week at the Brick.
there you go.
Yeah, that's a lovely little space, actually.
That I did a rep plot for them. They asked, they just got off the ground and they had done one festival and they didn't really have a lighting guy and it was kind of messy. And I just wanted a place to work. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about anything. It was like, I just want a place to light shows. I don't really care. And I think we had, I don't know, 24 Source 4s and like a 24 rack and an ETC Express, and that's pretty much it, right? Like,
Still there yet?
yeah, I'm sure it is, and I hung a rep plot for them, and I said, when I get a chance, I'd like to do some work in here. And it was like, yeah, when the calendar opens up, come in. And we did photo work, and we did, just other stuff because we could. And find those kinds of opportunities, because that's where you have fun and you learn stuff.
Yeah. Hopefully it never stops being fun.
Yeah, that's true too. If it is, you're not the right end of the business.
Too true.
So, what are you working on other than MLB? What should we be looking forward to from you, sir, in the coming, I don't know, say 6-12 months?
Shooting on 16 millimeter really inspired me, and like I said, I want to start doing something with large scale projections, but moving projections now. I've held on to the whole liquid projection thing for 20 years now since I started doing this, but I think it's time to start. I recently had a showing at Anthology Film Archives, which is wonderful, and my stuff is starting to gain traction, but I want to broaden it out beyond the screen, to tell you the truth. I want to make it part of a performance, and so that's where I'm going to start moving.
Awesome.
We'll see where it goes, yeah. And I've got some, so.
Well, Edmond, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We would love to have you back. Once you've got, maybe when your next couple of projects come up, let us know. We'd love to have you back on the show to talk about it. Maybe share some stills or share some of the video if you've got it. This was a pleasure. All right, now I get to go through my closing spiel. All right.
Thanks a lot.
No, thank you. This has been another episode of the Lighting Guy Podcast, one of AV Nation's stellar podcasts that you should be subscribing to in iTunes or wherever you get podcasts. I am your host, James J.P. Vidal. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.